This video has been co-produced by ALMI and the FTA and is intended to provide guidance and basic information to the users of lorry loaders. This video is not a substitute for the appropriate full training required for the operation of all types of lorry loader. It is intended to complement and not replace the need for formal and ongoing training and assessment. Like any piece of lifting equipment, lorry loaders can be highly dangerous if they aren't used in accordance with training instructions and manufacturers' recommendations. Complacency or incorrect practice when setting up, using or stowing the machine are common causes of serious incidents and occasionally fatalities. Using the lorry loader correctly will not only minimize wear and prolong the life of the machine, but it will significantly reduce the risk of any harm to yourself or others. Under Regulation 8 of the Lifting Operations and Lifting Equipment Regulations, or LOLA, it is a legal requirement that all lifting operations are planned by a competent person, who's normally known as the appointed person. The British Standard BS 7121 Part 4 provides guidance on how to comply with the requirements of LOLA and all other applicable legislation in relation to the safe use of lorry loaders. Under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, both employers and employees have duty of care in relation to the provision and use of safe equipment and safe systems of work, and are further expanded upon in the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations (MHSWR), the Provision and Use of Work Equipment Regulations (PUR), and LOLA, and will be explained in simple and practical terms throughout this video. Firstly, we need to understand a few references and terms that will be mentioned throughout each section of this DVD. The people involved in the planning and safe execution of any lifting operation are known as the lifting team. This has a hierarchical structure. The appointed person is legally responsible for the safe planning and execution of all lifting operations. The crane coordinator is only required if there are 2 or more cranes working in close proximity. The crane supervisor is responsible for ensuring the lifting operation is carried out in accordance with the safe system of work or the lifting plan. The slinger signaller is responsible for selecting the appropriate lifting accessories in accordance with the lifting plan, also for attaching and removing the accessories from the load and checking them before and after each use. In a signaling capacity, they're also responsible for directing the load movement. The operator is responsible for operating the lorry loader in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and the contents of the lifting plan. They must only accept signals from one person at any time and who is clearly identified to them. The only exception to this is the emergency stop signal, which can be given by anyone. Everyone within this hierarchy must be suitably trained and competent if they're to perform any of the lifting team roles. The level of planning required in any lifting operation can be determined by establishing 2 key pieces of information: the type of load being lifted and the environment within which the lift is being carried out. So, if a basic everyday load is to be lifted within a basic environment such as a secure level area containing no overhead hazards, then this operation is rated as a basic lift. Whereas a complex lift could be either a complex load, such as an awkward or unusual item, where the operation is carried out in a basic environment, or a basic load being lifted in a complex or not-so-safe environment, such as directly underneath an overhead power line. An intermediate lift will be somewhere in between, but essentially it is the responsibility of the appointed person to have control measures in place to establish the level of complexity during the early stages of planning. And once the lift complexity is known, it can be determined what planning will be necessary, including how many people should be involved and when or not they can fulfill more than one of the lifting team roles if qualified to do so. A document should then be prepared containing details of this, including a full risk assessment and method statement. This is known as the lifting plan. On the previous examples, the operator carrying out a basic lift can normally do so using a generic lifting plan. This will usually be a broadly scoped document intended to cover many or all basic scenarios. The operator will typically also be his own crane supervisor under this example, as he's working on his own. And upon arriving on site, he's responsible for checking the circumstances fit within the scope of this generic documentation. If they do, he can proceed with the lift. If not, he must contact his appointed person for further guidance and instruction. Under no circumstances must any changes be made to generic lifting plans unless authorized by the appointed person beforehand. At the other end of the spectrum, the complex lift would require the presence of the appointed person and, quite usually, further personnel to fill other roles, such as a slinger signaller or crane supervisor. Where appropriate, the appointed person can fill one or more of these roles if they're suitably qualified to do so. The lifting plan in this case would usually be specific to both the site and the task in hand. And the appointed person or crane supervisor is responsible for briefing the lifting team on the scope of the lifting plan beforehand, and for ensuring they sign the lifting plan to acknowledge they've been briefed and fully understand the operation being undertaken. So, to summarize, the operator must ensure he understands the scope of the lifting plan. On most basic and lower-level intermediate lifts, it is probable that the operator will be on his own, and therefore, by default, his own supervisor. In such cases, it is his sole responsibility to check when he arrives on site that the lift falls within the scope of his lifting plan and company-safe systems of work. In the event of any doubt, do not proceed. Stop and contact the appointed person who's responsible for making the decision concerning any changes to the lifting plan.